Blasphemy laws are discriminatory. They violate human rights.
Now, just a second. Not so fast.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you very much, Mark, and I too would like to welcome you to another edition of the American Religious Town Hall meeting. We're so very glad you've joined us. There are really two purposes for this particular program. First of all, it helps us to better understand one another and also promotes the cause of religious freedom, something I'm sure we all are very proud of and live to protect and defend. Before we get our program started here into our discussion, I'd like for you to meet our panelists. Let's begin with the gentleman that sits to my right.
Hello, my name is John Peterson. I'm the president of the Compass Rose Society, an Anglican organization that supports the global ministry of the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Anglican Communion.
I'm Jordan Offsire, a rabbi living in retirement in Palm Springs, California, and teaching classes and leading services within the greater community.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister of First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. We're a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Bert Beach. I'm a minister of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I've been retired for a few years, and I live 5 miles from our world headquarters where I served for several decades, and I'm still called in as a consultant.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Hello, my name is Alan Lane. I'm pastor of Fort Graham Baptist Church in the lovely Lake Whitney area, Central Texas.
Well, gentlemen, welcome and thank you for coming today. We know you're very busy in your various responsibilities in your churches, synagogues, schools. We're glad you took the time to be able to be with us on the Town Hall program today. Now, with regard to the program, it might seem a little old-fashioned. In fact, some viewers may think that blasphemy laws are something of the distant past and hardly exist in this millennium. However, a recent compendium released by Cardozo Law School outlines the issue of such laws from around the world. This detailed summary reveals the need to tackle such active or potential human rights abuses. These laws can be divided into two categories. The first category is this: laws specifically calling for sanctioning insult, blasphemy, or defamation of religion. And the second category is laws that do not specifically deal with blasphemy, but can be used to prosecute for offenses in order to punish minority religious believers or political dissidents. So the human rights issue is bigger than might seem at first. Today, we're going to ask our panelists to discuss these three questions, at least. First, are laws against blasphemy or prohibiting defamation of religion consistent with universal human rights? Second question, can laws prohibiting violation of public morality be used to punish those offending religious values held, at least in theory, by those in power? And then finally, is showing respect, tolerance, and courtesy regarding religious beliefs and practices of other people an issue of personal good manners and character rather than legal norms? That's our discussion today. Again, we're glad you've joined us. Let's return now to those who made our opening statements, and for that, we return to Jordan Offsire. Welcome back to the program. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure, I'm sure. Let me begin this brief response by making clear that the issue of blasphemy laws, although extant in many countries throughout the years centuries ago, fortunately do not exist in the United States of America. So we're speaking about laws that may still be applicable in other countries in the world, and so my comment is directed to that context, not only to that phenomenon. Blasphemy laws were intended to silence the opposition, not to allow people who had a different perspective from those in position of power of power to express those views openly and freely. In fact, they were used in the worst kinds of ways to coerce people and not to allow them to be different and to express views that are different. Surely that is an issue that contravenes everything that religious freedom stands for. And we must say that very clearly. But my first point, though, again, just to reiterate, is not an issue in the United States. It is not an official issue, and yet, of course, there are still those that would seek to quiet others who differ from themselves, but they would do so out of their own personal perspective rather than through laws that were intended to be enforced in that impositional way.
All right, thank you very much. Let's come back then to John Peterson. Canon Peterson, you started the program very interestingly today, and perhaps you'd like to broaden your thoughts for us, if you would, please.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Good to have you back. You've been gone for a few months, actually.
Yes.
Welcome back.
I would like to say that I'm sure that if we went around this table, all of us would agree that blasphemy laws are wrong. And on the other hand, we would say that we all support human rights. But as I read the Cardoza Law School compendium, what we would think would be seen as black and white is not so black and white, particularly in our nation today, where we have such divisive divisions in our societies, IES, not society, but societies. And I'm using that word societies because we are not one society. Yes, I believe blasphemy laws are wrong. But Pew Research pointed out in May and related an incident in Pakistan, and certainly Jordan, if that's this point I would agree fully with, that when the largest television station in Pakistan was the target of rash government accusations of blasphemy, defined as speech and action, considered them in contempt in relationship to God or the divine. Or we all remember in May when a pregnant woman was sentenced to death for her conversion from Islam to Christianity in Nigeria. And of course, we all would agree with that those situations are wrong. But there are still 6 states in the United States who have blasphemy laws on the books: Massachusetts, Michigan, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania. And it is easy for us to be able to point fingers to people in other countries, but I would want to argue today, and my point, not so fast, I would want to argue that we cannot be self-righteous in our own positions that we hold. In New Orleans, on July 20th this year, at the First Unitarian Universalist Unitarian Church, a Sunday morning service was taking place. When that service was in a very deep sacred space, the minister of the parish said, when a Christian fundamentalist anti-abortion group called Operation Save America disrupted the prayers and shouts of the words abomination, you are going to hell. The issue here is not abortion, but blasphemy. The issue here is human rights. It is a human right to be able to go to church, synagogue, or to a mosque to worship without experiencing blasphemies in the house of worship. But I fear most of us are willing to let such blasphemies happen, far more willing to let such behavior happen than we are willing to admit. It is in the divisiveness of our societies that we can easily be protected by our own sense of self-righteousness. Now, I'm totally opposed to what Operation Save America did, but if I can have just one more point. I have to remember, and we have to remember, that Jesus went to the temple in Matthew 21:12, and when Jesus entered the temple, he drove out all those who were sitting, selling, and buying in the courts of the temple and turned those tables over to the money changers. As a Christian, I find that what Jesus did was good. But I also have to say that I would love to have been able to ask a rabbi that day exactly what their opinion would have been when Jesus had done that.
Well, thank you. So your contention is it's a relative term.
It's a relative term.
All right. Now, let's hear what some of the other panelists have to say. We will come back we do have a rabbi here. We will come back to that in just a moment. Do you want to respond immediately?
I want to plead guilty to your...
Okay. Thank you. We'll come back around. But Tom Plumley, welcome back. Good to have you here, Reverend Plumley.
Thank you.
Your position on the matter,
Thank
please.
you. Actually, as I started off studying for this program, and I was thinking, yeah, blasphemy laws are wrong, and Reverend Peterson, Canon Peterson, really has sparked some ideas in me that they're very similar. Because see, what is wrong about a blasphemy law is that it's an establishment of religion, which is against the First Amendment of our Constitution. Those laws demand accommodation of one set of religious beliefs, regardless of the impact that accommodation of one set of religious beliefs has on everybody else and their religious beliefs. When I look at some of the recent Supreme Court decisions, it seems to me like we're accommodating a majoritarian sort of religious belief, regardless of what impact it has, that accommodation has on other people's religious beliefs. So we are not that far from having blasphemy types of establishment of religion in this country as well.
All right, thank you very much. Let's come across the table. Dr. Lane, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Your point and position on the matter.
Well, and indeed, if Jesus was convicted of anything, it was blasphemy, wasn't it? The question that he went in to cleanse the temple after a fashion because of the way in which it was being misused. And the point you made, Canon Peterson, about it being contextual. There might be those who would argue that interrupting a service, like you outlined, was certainly convicting or committing an act of blasphemy as they were in worship. But I suppose that happens maybe in a broader sense any time that we allow our political opinions to become more important to us than worship. And we see that a lot in many of our churches when we surrender the act of worship itself to some political stance or opinion, and that happens quite a bit. The issue I want to raise here, though, as Tom did, is that our history as Baptists, we look to the work that occurred in colonial days in the establishment of the Constitution as one of the high points of our contribution to the religious fabric of the world, the concept of religious freedom. Although there are times that we Baptists commit blasphemy after a fashion, some of our best heroes are the ones who stood up on, say, George Truett in 1925 on the Capitol steps and said that we ought to be willing to give our lives in order to protect the religious freedom of our Catholic brothers and sisters, or our Jewish brothers and sisters. Somehow we've lost that heroism. And that's the point that I want to make, is that you don't protect what's holy by setting new laws. You protect it by heroically defending it by the way you believe and the way you act.
Here, here.
And in the case around the world, that's what we're looking for, some heroes to stand up in those settings. And there are some, the woman that you mentioned, who was willing to die openly rather than surrender her profession of faith. And the more we see folks like that, the more the battle's going to turn.
All right, thank you very much. Across from you is Dr. Troval. Welcome back. Glad to have you here. You have been a professor. You've been in an academic setting for some time. Is blasphemy even on the radar screen among students these days?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Yeah, no. I live among blasphemies. No, just to clarify, I really appreciate the call to humility. It's easy to point fingers and start calling everyone else down when we haven't cleaned up our own house. I was reading that India, Ireland, Poland, and the Philippines, who we would call Western nations, or at least democratic nations, India isn't Western clearly, they have blasphemy laws, but they don't enforce them. So there are those on the books that aren't enforced, and then and with the states you mentioned. And I also appreciate the stand for heroism, that it's less about the laws than it is about someone standing up and defending religious freedom. I think what makes them bad, I mean, philosophically, what makes them bad is that it makes the state the arbiter of religious truth. And that is, I understand internal communities can argue about what's appropriate or inappropriate in their community, whatever religious community they are. We have those arguments all the time among ourselves about what's appropriate in our faith communities. But it's making the government the arbiter of religious truth and morality, and then enforcing it by law. We want freedom there. The state's sphere of influence is political, not religious. It is to maintain public order. Morality is a part of that. But religious people, insofar as they don't go against common morality, there should be a maximal religious freedom. Historically, blasphemy laws have been abused and used to manipulate, to find false accusation in people and to condemn innocent people. 19 people in Pakistan have life sentences because of these blasphemy laws. 14 are on death row. They even condemned in Pakistan a British man who was mentally ill who claimed to be a prophet. And I mean, it's targeting innocent people. The third piece here for me is that blasphemy laws undermine democracy. And because it's used to silence critics. Typically, if you can find a religious reason, then you can silence the whole group when they may actually have a political point to be made. And in a modern democracy, we do need the freedom to speak and to argue. And it is a violation of human rights, these blasphemy laws.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Trovall. We haven't heard yet from Bert Beach. Dr. Beach.
You haven't missed probably too much. But I think what has been said right now, I agree with everything has been said, more or less. I think that Canon Peterson has rightly pointed out that we do have on the books of some of our states laws that are really blasphemy laws. I think they're probably largely not implemented too much because they're there, and it's probably more difficult to take away the law, because that people would be accused probably of blasphemy trying to take away the law, and so they'd rather just ignore it and not apply it. But I think one thing the moderator in the statement pointed out, that these blasphemy laws are intended to some extent to control minorities that are not in harmony with the majority, and that's quite correct. But I think blasphemy laws also had the intention of controlling people inside the majority, keep them in line so they would behave. And the problem with these laws also is that you have a lot of people that are, simply said, are mentally disturbed. And they will say things, and blasphemy and all that. And to have these people then seriously taken to task by the law because of something they said is, of course, wrong in a sense, because these are sick people very often.
All right, thank you very much. Next to you, I promised we would come back to you, Rabbi Offsire, and so here we are.
We're on same topic, yes?
I think so.
Okay.
We're here.
All that I want to contribute is the distinction between having laws on the books. I'd be willing to bet that in those states that you referenced, people would not know that those laws are on the books. But much more important and significant is the existential reality of people in power, whether they're religious or secular, seeking to impose their will on others. And that indeed is what is at the heart of blasphemy, whatever it is that we call it. And to recognize that those kinds of coercions exist regularly and continuously throughout the world. And I would remind you of one that resonated with me so much I believe it was in Afghanistan, a young woman who insisted that women had the right to education was almost killed, and she survived. That was an act of blasphemy, whether it was on the books or not. And that's the point of my distinction. Not formally in the United States, but existentially, yes.
All right, thank you very much. You know, I'm afraid we're out of time for this segment. It went by rather quickly, but it's been an interesting discussion so far. We're going to come back in a few moments for the closing summary statements, but before we do, please stand by for this important message. Back to Mark Willey, and then we'll come back for our closing statements.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, Mark. Welcome back. We are to that time of the program when we hear the summary statements of our panelists. We're going to begin with John Peterson. Canon Peterson, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. Of course, I agree with Jordan in relationship to the existential situations that you've raised, and without any question. But I think that that's really where the issue is today.
Here.
Yes, it's exactly right here with us.
No, I mean in the United States.
Yes, in the United States. That so oftentimes we have become self-righteous, and we think that our way is the only way, instead of really hearing what is being said, allowing someone to have a diversity within the community in which we're living. We all do not think the same way. And so I think that this is what is really so important about this program today. Might we always hear what others are saying.
Thank you very much. Now, Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. Let me try to put some cohesiveness to the entire argument by saying that religious institutions, religious organizations exist to foster the interests of people who subscribe to the same or similar religious faith. Nations are not that, okay? Nations almost universally are in the wrong when they make themselves fostering the interests of people who subscribe to the same religious faith. That's if we're trying to get our government to do that for us, then we are crossing the line into establishment of religion, and we are doing things that are very similar to these undemocratic nations on the other side of the world that we condemn for their blasphemy laws.
All right, thank you very much. And now, Dr. Troval.
Governments are not the arbiter of religious truth. Faith communities are to argue that out, and I would support people being able to express their religious beliefs freely. I want to add one other thing, and that is one person's truth-telling is another person's blasphemy.
Right.
And that I think that religious communities need to have a thick skin in some sense, because if you really are arguing out about what's deeply true in your relationship with God, there's going to be a lot of sensitive issues drawn up, and I think people need to hear it. Even sometimes it's tough to hear other people say, I don't believe anything that you're saying, and I think it's ridiculous, and need to hear that, respect it, and give a clear witness.
So tolerance doesn't mean one has to believe what someone else believes
Right.
necessarily. Let's come across the table then. Dr. Lane, your summary statement.
Be willing to have that conversation without the threat of a beheading or something like that, right?
Exactly.
What was different about Jesus' preaching is that he was not a condemner. He didn't condemn. In fact, that's what set him apart for those who heard him. When he would stay in the presence of folks that were considered sinners without condemning them. In fact, he said he came to this world not to respond to the needs of those who were well, but those who were sick. And sometimes the concept of calling someone across the table a blasphemer impedes Jesus' work as he wants to do it in us.
All right, thank you very much. And Dr. Beach.
I think that the whole concept of blasphemy and trying to control people's religious speech and activities is really a part of theocracy. And theocracy is not the time in which we are living, except in certain parts of the world where they're still trying to go back maybe 1,000 years or more. So blasphemy laws are really a part of the pre-human rights situation in the world. And I think that our speech should be courteous, tolerant, respectful, but that's a matter of character, personal behavior. It's not a matter of legal norms.
All right, thank you. And then Rabbi.
Thank you very much. All too often, even in democracies, the voice or voices that express views that are different from the minority are sought to be condemned and repressed. And that really is the context of the larger issue. Yes, there may be laws of blasphemy on the books, but that's a remnant. The more difficult situation is the accepting of differences in the perspective of respect for other views, because the entire truth is not given to all of us to the exclusion of the truths of others.
All right, thank you very much. Well, gentlemen, this has been an interesting discussion. We never really know where things are going to go until we actually get into the conversation. But I think this has been enlightening, informative. I hope that you've enjoyed this. We're so very thankful that you tuned in today, and we hope that you'll come back again and bring some friends with you next time. But for now, as we say goodbye, the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.